The night was heavy with silence, broken only by the faint humming of the lights inside the tall corporate tower. A man in a faded uniform pushed his mop across the shiny marble floor, moving slowly as if he had all the time in the world. He was the janitor, invisible to the powerful people who walked past him every day. To them, he was just a shadow in the corner. Someone who existed only to keep the place clean. But tonight was different. Every step, every sound inside the building carried tension. The highest executives of Earth's biggest company were gathering for a meeting that could decide the future of humanity, and the janitor, quietly mopping, was right there in the middle of it. The air smelled of nervous sweat and polished stone. Guards in dark suits whispered into their earpieces, their eyes darting to the doors. Something important was about to happen. The executives whispered among themselves, speaking in quick, worried tones. They were waiting for the aliens. It had been years since Earth made contact with the alien race. They were powerful, advanced, and proud. They spoke a language no human fully understood. Translators and machines had tried to break it. But it was like trying to catch water with bare hands. The aliens agreed to meet the human leaders tonight, but if communication failed, war could follow. The janitor dipped his mop into the bucket again, his face calm and unreadable. No one paid attention to him, no one cared. He was just part of the background, but behind his quiet eyes, memories slept, memories of places far from Earth. The doors suddenly opened. The aliens entered, tall and graceful, their armor shining like living metal. Their leader stepped forward, his face unreadable, his voice low and powerful. The sound of his words filled the hall like rolling thunder. The executives froze, glancing at their translators. The machines beeped, hissed, then failed. Unable to form meaning, the alien leader continued to speak, his tone growing sharper. The humans shifted nervously, fear crawling across their faces without translation, without understanding. This meeting was breaking apart. One wrong word, one wrong gesture, and it could mean disaster. The janitor squeezed his mop dry and leaned it against the bucket. His hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from something deeper. The words of the alien tongue echoed in his ears. Words he had once known, once spoken. For a long moment, he stood still, heart pounding. The alien leader's eyes swept across the humans and then paused. He seemed ready to turn away, ready to end the fragile talk. The room was slipping into chaos, voices overlapping, fear taking hold. And then, from the corner of the room, a soft voice spoke. It was the janitor. His words were clear, flowing, perfect. The alien language rolled off his tongue as naturally as breathing. The sound cut through the noise of panic. The alien leader stopped at once. His eyes widening, every human in the room turned, their jaws dropping. The janitor stood there in his faded uniform, his mop still dripping water. Yet the words he spoke carried power, rhythm, and respect. The aliens stared at him, recognizing the precision of his speech. The leader tilted his head, his sharp eyes studying the man. For a moment, no one moved. It was as if the entire hall held its breath. The janitor finished his sentence, bowing his head slightly. His voice was calm, but inside his chest, his heart thundered like a storm. The alien leader stepped forward, his massive figure casting a shadow over the janitor. Then he spoke. This time not in anger, but in measured curiosity. His tone was different, softer. Testing, questioning, the janitor replied without hesitation, his voice steady, his words flawless. Gasps echoed across the human side of the room. The executives whispered to one another, unable to believe what they were seeing. A man who cleaned their floors, who emptied their trash, was now doing what no expert could. The janitor had broken the wall between human and alien with nothing but his voice. The alien leader's expression shifted. no longer filled with cold superiority. Instead, there was recognition, even respect. The janitor lowered his gaze. Knowing the weight of what he had just done, he had revealed a part of himself he had long kept hidden, and now nothing would ever be the same again. The room was silent, except for the faint dripping of water from the mop. The janitor stood quietly, waiting. He knew the world had just changed, and all eyes, human and alien, were now fixed on him. The silence in the hall was heavy. Every human and alien froze as the janitor's voice echoed against the high walls. For a moment, time itself seemed to stop. The alien leader stared at the man in disbelief, his sharp eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. The words that came from the janitor's mouth were pure, fluent, and without hesitation. Gasps spread through the humans. The executives who had been whispering nervously now leaned forward. Eyes wide, they had seen translators fail. They had seen machines break. But now, the janitor, someone they had never once respected, spoke with perfection. It was like watching a ghost rise from the shadows. The aliens shifted uneasily. Their armor plates clinking softly, they whispered to one another in their own tongue. Shocked that this human, dressed in dirty clothes, could speak their sacred language. Some alien guards tightened their grips on their weapons, suspicious of a trick. But the alien leader raised his hand, silencing them. His gaze remained locked on the janitor, sharp and searching. The janitor stood calmly, though, inside his chest. His heart raced like a wild drum. He had not spoken this language for many years, but the sounds flowed back to him as naturally as breathing. He had once lived among these people, walked their streets, shared their fires. Now those memories had returned to life before the most important audience of his life. One executive leaned close to another and whispered, "Is this a joke? How could a janitor know their tongue?" Another executive, pale with fear, muttered, "If he's telling the truth, he just saved us from disaster." But none of them dared to interrupt. The alien leader spoke again, this time slower, his tone different. There was no anger in his voice now, only curiosity. The janitor listened carefully and then replied smoothly. His words carried respect, each syllable precise. The aliens exchanged glances, their suspicion melting into surprise. A murmur ran across the alien side of the room. One of the younger warriors stepped forward, his eyes narrowing at the janitor. He spoke a fast and complex phrase, almost like a challenge. It was a phrase no simple student could ever answer. The janitor closed his eyes for a heartbeat, then answered flawlessly. The warrior stopped in his tracks, his face betraying shock. The executives could not stay quiet any longer. One of them stood, his voice trembling as he asked, "Who are you? How do you know their words?" The janitor did not answer, not to the humans at least. His eyes remained on the aliens, as if only they truly mattered. That silence only deepened the mystery. The alien leader's lips curved slightly, the closest thing his kind had to a smile. He spoke in a softer voice, testing the janitor with old proverbs and hidden meanings. The janitor replied without hesitation. His tone carried not only knowledge, but also respect. It was not the cold learning of a translator. It was the living memory of someone who had been there. The humans grew restless. Some were terrified, others suspicious, and a few were fascinated. To them, this janitor was suddenly no longer invisible. He was a puzzle, and they wanted answers, but the aliens seemed less interested in who he was. They cared more about what he had proven. Minutes passed, and the hall filled with whispers. Every eye was locked on the janitor. The tension that had once been about war was now about him. The janitor lowered his head slightly, as if embarrassed by the attention, but deep inside, he knew the truth there was no turning back. The alien leader finally turned to the humans, speaking in his own tongue. But this time, the janitor translated his words before the machines could fail. His voice was steady, each phrase falling with weight and power. "Your people came to speak, and I have listened." The alien leader said through him, "I will hear your offer." But only through him. The executives froze in shock. Through him. The alien leader had chosen the janitor, not the politicians. Not the businessmen, not the experts. The aliens had decided to trust the man with the mop. A wave of disbelief ran through the humans. Their pride burned, but they could not argue. The janitor lifted his mop, leaning it gently against the wall. He stood taller than before, his voice steady. He had been invisible for so long, but now the light was on him. The aliens respected him. The humans feared him. And in that strange balance, a new future had begun. Yet behind the gasps, the whispers, "Ugh," and the sudden respect, danger stirred in. The shadows, for not everyone wanted peace, and not everyone would allow a janitor to hold such power. The room was still buzzing with whispers. Executives huddled together in confusion. Aliens murmured in low voices, their glowing eyes fixed on the janitor. He stood quietly at the center of it all. His hands folded in front of him, but inside. His mind, old doors creaked open, and memories he had buried long ago returned. The janitor had once lived a very different life, before he wore the uniform of a cleaner, before he pushed a mop through silent halls. He had traveled far beyond Earth. Long ago, he had joined a cargo crew that worked between human colonies and alien outposts. He was young then, bold and hungry for adventure. He had stepped onto alien soil when most humans still feared leaving their own world. The first time he heard the alien tongue, it was like music and thunder mixed together. Complex, layered, sharp and soft at once. Others in his crew dismissed it as noise. Too hard to learn, but he had listened, night after night, copying sounds, writing symbols, until slowly the words began to make sense. He learned not from books, but from living among them. He sat with alien traders, sharing food across campfires. He walked through their markets, where bright metals shined and strange scents filled the air. He listened to children speak and copied their simple words. Then he listened to elders chant their history and learned the heart of their tongue. For years, he moved between human and alien, not fully one of them, not fully apart. He became a bridge. Though few knew it, he grew close to their people, close enough that they trusted him with things no outsider should know. And in that trust, he found both honor and danger. The janitor blinked, pulled back to the present as an executive barked out, "Who are you, really? You were never just a janitor, were you?" But he gave no answer. He kept his gaze low, hiding the weight of his memories. Because those memories were not all light, there was darkness too. He remembered the day war had come to the outpost. One moment, laughter filled the air. The next, fire rained from the sky. The cargo station had become a battlefield. He had seen humans and aliens die side by side. He had tried to speak peace, but his words were drowned in blood and fire. That day, he lost people he had cared about, friends, mentors, even the alien family that had welcomed him like their own. The screams of that night never left him, and when the dust cleared, he walked away from it all. He swore never again to speak their language, never again to hold the burden of being a bridge. He returned to Earth, broken. He took the first simple job he could find, one where no one would ask questions, and for years he swept floors, scrubbed walls, and lived in silence. But now fate had dragged him back. The alien leader was watching him closely, as if seeing a shadow of recognition in his face. Perhaps the leader, too, carried memories of that dark past. Perhaps they had crossed paths once, long ago. The janitor's heart tightened at the thought, but he remained still. The executives, however, were growing restless. One of them whispered harshly, "If he knows their tongue, maybe he's a spy." Another hissed, "Or maybe he's dangerous." No. Man hides something like that for so long without reason. Fear began to twist into suspicion. The same people who had ignored him now feared him. The janitor raised his head slowly. His eyes moved between the humans and the aliens. He knew both sides. He knew both fears. And he knew that if the truth came out, the full truth of who he had been would shake everything. The alien leader finally spoke again, his voice heavy and commanding. He asked a question in his own tongue, a question that cut deep. Why do you hide your voice, speaker of our words? The janitor's chest rose and fell. He wanted to say he was tired, that he wanted peace, that he wanted to forget, but the words caught in his throat. Instead, he gave a simple reply, because some truths bring only pain. The leader studied him, silence stretching between them. The aliens murmured again. Unsure of what the man truly meant, the humans leaned in, unsettled, desperate to understand. But the janitor gave no more answers. Behind his calm face, the secret past burned like fire. A past filled with friendship and betrayal, with trust and loss. A past that had shaped him into the man standing here now. A past that refused to stay buried. The janitor lowered his gaze once more. Gripping the handle of his mop like a staff, he knew that the ghosts of his history had returned. And soon, both human and alien would learn the truth. Whether he wanted it or not, the alien leader stood tall in the center of the great hall, his armor catching the cold light around him. His guards stayed tense, their eyes glowing faintly, their hands resting on the hilts of strange weapons. The humans, meanwhile, looked shaken, their pride bruised by the fact that the janitor had spoken when their trained experts had failed. The air itself felt heavy, as if everyone inside was standing on the edge of something dangerous. The alien leader turned his sharp gaze back to the janitor. He had seen humans before, but never one who spoke with such fluency, such ease. There was no way to fake that kind of knowledge. Still, he could not accept it at once. Respect in his world was earned through challenge. Not simply handed over, he lifted a clawed hand and spoke, his voice deep and commanding. The words rolled out in a complex form of the alien tongue, layered with hidden meanings. It was a challenge, a test. Something no translator could ever hope to capture. The humans around the room held their breath, not understanding a single sound. But the janitor listened quietly, his head tilted slightly. The words stirred memories. Memories of nights under alien skies, when he had listened to elders chant the same phrases. When the leader finished, silence stretched. Then the janitor spoke. His reply was calm, his voice carrying strength. He answered in perfect rhythm, not only giving the translation, but also matching the tone of respect hidden in the words. The alien leader's eyes narrowed, then softened ever so slightly. The test had been answered. One of the alien guards stepped forward suddenly, his voice sharp. He barked out another phrase, faster this time, twisting the words into a riddle. It was designed to trick, designed to expose anyone who pretended to know their tongue. The janitor's lips curved into a small, tired smile. He answered, not only with words, but with the cultural gesture that matched them, pressing his hand to his chest, bowing slightly at the right angle. The alien guard froze in shock, then lowered his head respectfully. Gasps spread among the humans. They could not believe what they were witnessing. The janitor had not only spoken, he had matched their traditions, their very soul. He was not just repeating sounds. He was living the language. The alien leader stepped closer, his towering frame casting a shadow over the janitor. He asked another question, this one sharper, heavier. Tell me, he said in his tongue, what is the meaning of honor among my people? The hall grew silent, the humans watching in confusion, the aliens leaning forward. The janitor closed his eyes for a moment. Remembering a night long ago, he remembered sitting with an elder by the fire, listening to the story of their people, and then he spoke, his words slow and measured. Honor is not in power, not in wealth, not in victory. He said in their tongue, it is in keeping your word, even when it breaks your heart. The alien leader froze. Those were the exact words of their oldest proverb, a proverb outsiders should never have known. His eyes softened, and for the first time, true respect glimmered in them. The humans whispered nervously, did he just pass their test? One asked, this is impossible, muttered another. But deep down, Phil knew it was real. The janitor had done what none of them could. He had not only spoken, but he had been accepted. The alien leader lowered his head slightly, a gesture of acknowledgement, but his voice was still firm when he spoke. You are no ordinary human, he said in his language. Why do you hide among them as one who cleans their floors? The janitor's throat tightened. He did not answer directly, he only said softly, sometimes it is easier to hide in shadows than to stand in the light. The leader studied him for a long moment, then gave a slow nod. It was enough for now, but while respect was beginning to grow, danger had not vanished. The humans shifted uneasily, some angry, some suspicious. They did not like that the aliens seemed to look at the janitor with more trust than at them. And in the far corner of the room, a figure moved quietly, scribbling notes. Watching the janitor with narrow eyes, someone had already decided he was a threat. The alien leader finally turned to the gathered humans, speaking through the janitor. I will continue these talks, he declared, but know this, if you wish peace, it will be through him. The word sent a shiver through the humans. The janitor lowered his head, quietly wishing the ground would swallow him. But it was too late now. The test was over, and he had passed. The great hall was calmer now, but beneath that calm ran an invisible current of fear. The alien leader had tested the janitor and found his words true. Respect had been shown, but respect alone could not stop danger from growing. For in the shadows of the meeting, not everyone wished for peace. The executives whispered among themselves, their voices sharp and low. Some felt relief, believing the janitor had saved them from disaster. Others felt anger, their pride shattered because the aliens trusted a man with a mop more than them. Jealousy and suspicion began to poison their thoughts, and on the alien side, not all were pleased either. A few guards exchanged dark glances, their hands brushing the hilts of their blades. They did not want peace, they wanted dominance. The janitor stood silently between them, his mop leaning against the wall, his eyes steady, but he was not blind. He had lived among humans and aliens long enough to read the subtle movements, the sharp tones, the dangerous silence that filled the air. Something was wrong, and he could feel it pressing closer. Later, as the meeting broke for a short recess, the janitor carried his bucket down a quieter hallway. The humans ignored him, again trying to push him back into invisibility, but as he moved past a half-open door, he froze. Voices leaked from inside, hushed but sharp. He recognized the alien tongue immediately, but this was not the leader's voice. These were the voices of younger warriors, bitter and hungry. The leader is blinded by this human. One voice hissed, he bows too quickly, too easily. To their kind, another snarled, this janitor is dangerous, he speaks words he should not know. A third added, we must end this before it begins. The janitor's grip on the mop tightened. He backed away silently, but the words burned into his mind. There was betrayal. Inside the alien ranks, a plan forming against peace. If they moved now, the talks would collapse, and blood would be spilled again. He returned to the hall, his face calm, but his mind racing. He could not warn the humans, they barely trusted him. He could not accuse the aliens, their pride would turn against him. He was trapped, caught between two sides who might both see him as the enemy. The alien leader looked at him when he entered, as if sensing the weight in his eyes, but the janitor said nothing. He knew that speaking too soon could destroy the fragile respect he had earned. Instead, he waited, listening carefully as the meeting resumed. The executives presented their offers. Their words clumsy, their voices trembling. The alien leader listened in silence, his expression unreadable. Again and again, the humans looked to their machines, but when the devices failed, their eyes turned reluctantly to the janitor. Each time, he spoke with steady calm, carrying the meaning across the gap with every word. The aliens grew more certain of his place, and with every word, the humans grew more unsettled. But danger still pressed closer. The janitor's ears caught the faint shuffle of alien armor at the edges of the room. The younger warriors were restless, their eyes fixed not on the humans, but on him. They whispered to each other in tones too soft for most to hear. But he caught enough to know the truth they wanted to strike before respect turned into trust as the meeting stretched late into the night. The janitor stepped aside to refresh the bucket of water. Alone in the service corridor, he allowed himself a long breath. He remembered another night years ago when whispers had grown into war. He remembered the fire, the screams, the betrayal, and his heart ached at the thought of it happening again. When he returned, he found the alien leader watching him closely. The leader's eyes seemed to pierce through his silence. "You hear?" "More than you speak," the leader said softly in his own tongue. Words only the janitor could understand. The janitor bowed his head, replying quietly. "And you see more than you admit." The leader's gaze sharpened, as if testing whether the man had caught the storm building beneath the surface. The janitor gave no direct answer, but the truth lingered in his silence. Both of them knew the peace they were trying to build was already under attack. Around them, the humans argued over numbers and promises. Around them, the alien guards shifted restlessly, and in the shadows, betrayal sharpened its blade. The janitor stood still, his face calm, but inside his chest, his heart burned with a single thought. He had tried to run from his past, to hide in the simple life of a janitor. But now, fate was pulling him back into the storm. And soon, he would have to choose remain silent, or step into danger once more. The night dragged on, and the talks grew heavier. The humans argued among themselves, whispering of trade and power. The aliens sat in silence, watching, weighing every word, and in the center of it all, the janitor stood like a bridge no one had expected. His voice carried meaning back and forth, his words keeping the fragile line of peace alive, but his heart was troubled. He had overheard whispers of betrayal. He had seen the hungry looks in the eyes of younger warriors. He knew the talks were a fragile shell, ready to crack with the slightest pressure, and once again, he found himself in the same storm he had once tried to escape. Later that night, when the meeting ended for a short pause, the alien leader called for him. They walked together into a quiet chamber. The guards keeping their distance, the leader stood near the wide window that looked out over the city lights. He did not look at the janitor at first, only spoke in his low, commanding voice. "You carry the words of my people with the heart of one who has lived them," he said. "Tell me, why do you help these humans who do not even respect you?" The janitor stood silently, his hands behind his back. For a long moment, he did not answer. Then he spoke softly, his voice carrying the weight of old scars, because peace saves lives. "And I've seen too much war." The alien leader finally turned, his eyes glowing faintly. He studied the janitor's face, searching for weakness. Instead, he found only quiet strength. "You speak truth," the leader said, "but truth is not enough already. Others plot to end this meeting." The janitor's eyes widened slightly, but he did not show full surprise. He only asked, "You know of it too?" The leader gave a slow nod. "Some of my own are blind with pride. They do not wish for peace with humans. They see weakness in talking, strength only in war. The janitor lowered his head, the words matching what he had overheard in the hallways. Danger was no longer just suspicion, it was real, close, and ready to strike. Before either of them could speak further, a sharp sound echoed from beyond the chamber. A shout, followed by the heavy thud of boots. The leader stiffened. The janitor's heart jumped. They rushed back toward the hall, and what they saw froze every soul in the room. A group of alien warriors had broken formation, stepping forward with weapons in hand. The humans cried out in panic. Guards raised their arms, confusion filling the space. The younger warriors shouted in their tongue, their voices loud with fury. The humans are not worthy. They roared. They hide behind machines and lies. They deserve fire, not peace. The alien leader barked out a command, but the traitors ignored him. Their weapons glowed with dangerous light, their eyes burning with rage. The humans scrambled for cover. Executives shouting orders that no one followed. Chaos rippled across the hall, and then the janitor stepped forward. His faded uniform hung loosely, his mop still leaning by the wall, yet his voice cut through the storm like a blade. He spoke in the alien tongue, sharp, commanding, filled with authority. "Stand down," he said. The words carried not as a request, but as an order. The traitors froze for a moment. Shocked that he spoke with such force, one of them snarled, "You are nothing but a human." But the janitor stepped closer, his eyes burning with memories of fire and blood. "I have walked your lands," he said. "I have eaten at your tables. I have heard your songs. I know your honor, and what you do now has none." The hall went silent. The traitors faltered. The alien leader's eyes narrowed. But he did not move. He was watching, testing. The janitor's heart pounded, but he stood firm. The younger warriors growled, their pride clashing with their hesitation. Finally, one lifted his weapon, ready to strike. The janitor moved without thinking, with a sudden motion. He grabbed the bucket beside him and swung it forward. Water splashed across the weapon, shorting its glowing energy in a crackling spark. The warrior stumbled back in shock. The hall gasped, and in that single moment, guards loyal to the leader rushed forward, disarming the traitors before they could recover. The chaos ended as quickly as it began. The traitors were dragged to their knees, snarling in defeat. The alien leader stepped forward, his voice cold with fury as he condemned them. "You shame your blood," he thundered. But then his eyes turned to the janitor. There was no anger, there was no anger. They were only deep, heavy respect. The humans stood frozen, unable to believe what they had witnessed. The man they had ignored, the man they had dismissed, had just stopped an assassination with nothing but courage and a bucket of water. The janitor's chest heaved. As he caught his breath, he had not wanted this. He had not wanted the light. But fate had pushed him forward, and now there was no stepping back. The hall was silent, broken only by the dripping sound of water on the floor. The janitor stood still, his mop beside him, his eyes lowered. But everyone, human and alien, looked at him differently now. Not as a janitor, not as a shadow, but as someone who carried the weight of peace on his shoulders. And in that silence, the future began to shift. The hall was filled with silence after the storm. The traitors had been dragged away, their shouts fading into the distance. The humans stood pale and shaken, some clutching their briefcases, some whispering in fear. The aliens remained steady, their glowing eyes fixed on the janitor who still stood at the center of it all. The janitor's chest rose and fell, his clothes damp from the spilled water, his hands still trembling slightly from the sudden fight. He leaned on his mop as if it were a staff, his face calm, though his heart thundered inside. He had not wanted to stand in the light. But now there was no way back into the shadows. The alien leader stepped forward, his armor gleaming under the cold lamps. He stopped in front of the janitor, towering over him. His presence heavy like a mountain. But when he spoke, his voice was not filled with anger. It carried weight, but also honor. You have stood when others failed. You have spoken when others were silent. You have acted when others trembled. The leader said in his tongue. The janitor lowered his eyes, bowing his head slightly, replying softly, I only did what was needed. The alien leader raised his clawed hand and struck it gently to his chest. Among his people, it was the highest sign of respect. Gasps echoed through the alien ranks, for such a gesture was never shown to outsiders. The leader then bowed his head slightly toward the janitor. It was not deep, but it was enough to shake the hall. The humans stared in disbelief. The executives who once ignored the janitor now looked at him as if he were someone entirely new. Whispers ran through their ranks, words of shock, confusion, and even fear. How could this man, who'd mopped their floors, now hold the respect of alien royalty? Their pride burned, but their silence was forced. The alien leader turned to the gathered humans and spoke again, this time through the janitor's voice. My people will honor peace, but it will be built through him, he declared. He carries truth in his words, and that is greater than gold or weapons. The humans shifted uncomfortably, their faces red with humiliation, but they could not argue. The proof was already before them. The janitor translated every word faithfully. Though each sentence weighed heavy on him, he had wanted nothing but quiet. Nothing but a life far from conflict. But now, both sides had placed him in the center. He was no longer just a janitor. No longer just a shadow in the corner. He was the bridge, whether he liked it or not. When the meeting finally ended, the humans walked away with stiff faces. Some cast him cold looks. Others avoided his eyes entirely. But the aliens remained near him, their heads dipping respectfully as they passed. One of the younger guards, who earlier had doubted him, now placed his fist to his chest in silent acknowledgement. The janitor answered only with a small nod, his face unreadable. Later, as the hall emptied, the alien leader spoke quietly to him one last time. You are more than they see. More than even you admit to yourself, he said. The janitor's voice was low when he replied, I am only a man who wished for peace. The leader's eyes glimmered faintly. Then you are greater than kings, he said, before turning away. The janitor was left standing in the vast, empty hall, his mop leaning against the wall, water dripping softly onto the marble floor. The echoes of the night lingered in his ears, the whispers of betrayal, the gasps of shock, the words of respect. He thought of his past, of the fire and the loss, of the promise he once made never to speak again, and yet fate had forced him back. He had spoken, and the world had listened, slowly. He picked up his mop once more. To anyone who entered, he might look the same, just a janitor cleaning after a long night. But those who had seen, those who had heard, would never forget. The man who mopped the floors had become the man who carried peace between two worlds. And as the dawn's light began to creep through the high windows, the janitor whispered softly to himself, sometimes the smallest voice can carry the weight of the stars.